Record.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Talking with Professionals. I, of course, am Aaron Stelly with the Parham Team, and alongside me is my partner, Graham Parham. And today we have got a really amazing guest, guys. We've got Mercedes Torres with Cash Flow Savvy, and Mercedes Torres is an awesome real estate professional, has been in the business for years, flipped thousands of properties, knows what she's doing. Mercedes, thank you for joining us. We are really pumped.
Thank you so much for having us, guys.
Absolutely, absolutely. So to give all of our listeners out there a quick background on Mercedes, just in her first 2 years alone, she flipped 24 properties, excuse me, up to 2,000 plus now real estate transactions to her name. She's been on the A&E show, Flip That House, graduated from UCLA from what I understand out in California, and is really familiar with anything and everything when it comes to real estate investing, building that financial freedom, that goal that we're all shooting for. And Mercedes, just if you can give us a little bit of background about yourself. We'd love to kind of learn how you came into this industry and what has kind of ultimately led you on this successful path.
Wow, that's a loaded question. And thank you so much for having me, Eric. So what led me to this industry? Believe it or not, I started exactly where Graham started. I was in mortgage banking. Back in the day, I was all about the subprime, the NAGAM loans. Yeah, that was me. I worked for that company. And, because I was subprime, I realized that I was working with individuals that could barely afford to make their mortgage payments. But what I learned really quickly is they were buying houses. They were, primary houses. So then they would refinance it and then they would take the money out and then go buy a rental. And this was your average, your teacher, your mechanic. And I thought, well, if they're doing it and they're only making $35,000 a year, why can't I do it if I'm making $40,000 a year? So it dawned on me. I did my first flip with, I was working for the bank. So it was very easy for me to get a loan. I was a W-2 employee. I had amazing mentors who were my bosses. And they're like, yeah, all you have to do is get the down payment, buy a house. I did my first flip, and in my first flip, I made $86,720.
Wow.
I was only making
Awesome.
$40,000 a year. So that did it. It triggered something in me, and I was like, that means that I can teach people how to do this because I had already done it myself. So that kind of triggered and launched me into that component of like real estate investing while I
Sure.
was a W-2 employee, because man, those W-2 little pay stubs, when you can show that to a bank, that's so sexy to a bank. You're instantly lendable, especially back in that time. And so I just kept doing it over and over again. And then when the market turned in 2008,
Mhm.
I had already that bug. I had done enough flips that I captured the attention of national TV. So I was on a show called Flip That House. But what I quickly learned is that I was always looking for the next deal. So I thought, wait a minute, there's got to be markets in middle America where I can invest money in it and it pays me. And that's when I started falling into the world of, okay, let me buy a house, let me fix it up and put tenants in it so I can get that paycheck every single month. Well, I was living in California at the time. For those of you that know the California market, it is extremely difficult to cash flow in California. So I knew that there were markets in middle America where the purchase price and the rent ratio were going to give you a solid return, more than I was getting in California for sure. And I didn't want to go back to work and be a W-2 employee. I had already tasted that life, So I created an algorithm to pull information from government census so that I could see which markets in middle America would provide that solid return. And once I found that, I dove into those markets where I knew there were more renters than buyers. And I started buying in markets where the demand was high for rentals. So
What's
before I knew it, I started doing 2, 4, 6, and the rest is history. Cashflow Savvy was born. So
we
in a
used to,
nutshell,
It's
that's it.
incredible.
I used to work with a very similar scenario with a guy that lives in San Jose, and he found boots on the ground in those particular markets. At that time, it was in Dallas, and it's very difficult to find the right boots on the ground. And tell us about that process.
hardest job in my life has been creating the teams on the ground. You know, I often tell my students, Graham, it doesn't matter how great your property is, how cute it looks, how awesome of the neighborhood it is. None of that matters if you do not have a team on the ground, AKA property management, a maintenance team, and a rehab team that can get your property to perform. Hands down. So the hardest part for me was property management. And believe it or not, I was property management for the first year of my life. Now, mind you, I was living in California and I was managing properties in Memphis, Tennessee, Danville, Illinois, Indianapolis, Indiana, and it was so hard. But what I quickly learned is the locals, the mama and papa shops that were hungry, those were the ones that I started with. And so I became a primary source of income for them because I started promising them, if you will, 2 to 3 consistent properties every month. And at the end of the day, Graham, we're all here doing the same thing.
Sure.
Everyone's trying to make a buck. So if they knew that Mercedes was going to give them 2 to 3 properties every single month and it was going to be consistent, they started to cater to me. And that's when I started to grow. Now, before I knew it, I grew a team, but it was very organic. Originally, it was for me. So nothing else mattered. It's just if it fit my box, my criteria, my everything. And then I thought, well, if it's working for me, why isn't it going to work for, my investors? That's when we started our podcast, where we started educating people how to do it. And then people were like, can you just sell me one of your properties? And I was like, sure, I already did everything to it. I already bought it. I already fixed it up. And most importantly, I already have a team that placed the tenant, that vetted the tenant, that has a relationship with the tenant. So now the tenant is comfortable paying rent. And at the end of the day, that's all you want your people to do.
Exactly.
You want them to rent. So to answer your original question, Graham, the hardest part was finding property management for sure.
And it still is today, believe it or not. And at least it is for me. I've got properties scattered all over the country, and sometimes the biggest is not the best. And I love the little mom and pop shops because they give you attention. They'll pick up the phone. They'll respond to you. I mean, seriously. I mean, some of these management companies today, it's all they hide behind emails. You never get to talk to anybody. It's kind of a nightmare. And I had to do a deep dive about a year ago on all my property managers just to see, what they're doing. I was giving too much trust up front and I wasn't getting educated. I wasn't getting my answers. So I went ahead and asked the questions, got my answers, and then I trusted or I changed. And that's something that I had to do last year. But I got to tell you, management is truly the key. It truly is. Well, good.
Another thing, I'm gonna hop on that because it's really, really important. Once you're in a market and you have several rentals, I quickly learned to diversify property management. And I tell them all about it. So I have a property management team, which is my core, but I always have a second team on standby. You never know what's going to happen to your first team. And then your second team knows that there's a first team. The first team knows that there's a second team. So inadvertently, they start to provide you with better service because they're thinking that you're making them compete. And that's not my goal. My goal is to cover myself if for whatever reason something happens to team A, I've always got team B on the side. Learn that the hard way. Yeah. So, you don't want to ever be caught in a situation where you have a property management team and then that property management team literally folds overnight or someone dies. That happened to me. I had a property management team in Memphis, Tennessee. I had 47 rentals and the property manager died unexpectedly.
Oh my God.
And I had 47 properties, my own, and then what I had sold, to my clients, and I had no plan B. So I had to fly to Memphis. I had to figure it out, and I had to figure it out quick because it just so happened that it happened right at the end of the month. So all the rents were collected by property management, kept by the family, and I had no plan B. So learn that the hard way. Diversify your property management teams.
Well,
and I love the aspect of,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I love the aspect of keeping that healthy competition kind of between the standby company as well. Absolutely.
For sure. And you don't lie about it either. You're
Oh, sure.
completely transparent with,
Mhm.
hey, I have to have the team down the street because here's what happened to me before.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
so, you know what, I learned one thing, that like the transparency of that relationship, it's so important.
Very.
You know, back in the day, I was a little bit skeptical about sharing that and being completely honest. Today, I'm like, no, you need to know, here it is, you know, here it is, what it's like to work with Mercedes. And if it's not a good fit for you, that answers our question right there. We shouldn't be working together.
Well, the good thing about when you went to Memphis to find a management company, I mean, there's so many turnkeys in Memphis, you can't throw a rock and not hit one. So the
Yeah.
availability was good versus other markets. So that was a good thing in your favor. So yeah. Well, Mercedes, we obviously are doing this today to get you to show off some of those properties that you have, because our listeners are constantly begging for properties. And I know the inventory is finally starting to get a little better. And, you know, of course, the rates have an influence of people slowing down and rethinking the investment. But if somebody came to me today and came to you today and said, well, the rates are high, why should I invest? What is the perfect answer?
You know what I always say? Rates are high relative to what? Because the reality is that when people think about a rate, they compare it to what happened 3 years ago when we had the pandemic. Rates were 2 to 3%. And I guarantee that rates will never be that low in our lifetime. It is impossible. And so I'm spoiled. I started, 14 years ago where rates were at 14%. So when I get rates at 6.5%, I'm like, I'll take it, and I'll take it twice on Sunday. Because the reality is, I'm not just looking at the rate, I'm looking at everything else that holding a property has to offer you. So I don't only talk about the cash flow, I talk about the depreciation, I talk about the appreciation, I talk about all of the tax benefits, most importantly, the amortization. So yeah, we can talk about the rate. The rates are 6%. So what? When rates jump up to 8%, Graham, people are going to be really happy that they locked at a 6%.
Right.
And yeah, and so the reality is that the people that focus on the rate, they're just not focusing on the thing that's most important, in my opinion, which is creating wealth and creating a legacy and holding an asset, thinking about what is this asset going to do for me just 5 years down the line. Can I share a little story that has nothing to do with rates?
Yes.
But I was a late mom. I became a mom at 40 years old, and I became an accidental mom at 40 years old because my plan was to have my first kid at 42, but whatever. Mateo decided to come at 40. Welcome to the world. And I'm holding this little baby literally after I just gave birth. And I thought, how am I going to put this kid through college? I was in the hospital for 7 days for, whatever reason. And so I would always get properties coming in. Obviously, I had just started the turnkey operation, and I came across a property. This property was in Danville, Illinois. Ever heard of that place? Because it's this small.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so Danville, Illinois. And I said, you know what? I'm going to buy this property for my son because this property is going to put my son through college. Long story short, I bought that property for $80,000. My son is now 11 years old. When he was 5 years old, by the way, I bought the property, I fixed it up, I put tenants in it. Rents were about $700 at that time. Rents have been climbing, okay? When my son was 5 years old, I refinanced that house. My son, 5 years old, now owns 2 properties. The original property in Danville, Illinois. I'm all about diversification. So the second property is in Indianapolis, Indiana. What happens? COVID happened. Everyone started to refinance. Rates were super, super low. Equity was super amazing. I got his third property. Mateo is going to be 12 years old, July 6th. He has 3 properties. We'll have 3 properties on July 6th. The kid is 12 years old. Now he's old enough to understand that money's coming in. I'm teaching him how to balance his checkbook. Moral of my story is I bought one property for $80,000. Mind you, I financed that property, so I only came in with about $20,000. He has now 3 properties, 12 years old. So my analogy is one for college, one for the wedding, and one for his car. That's how it goes. But my point is, I didn't think about the rate. I didn't think about anything other than I have to buy an asset that's going to pay for this kid's college because mama ain't going to pay for college. So the thought of if I would have thought about the rate at that time, which wasn't the best, to be quite honest, I would have not had 3 properties today and the kid is 12 years old. So my point is, focus on the other benefits of holding an asset, because truly, I can't even explain it on a podcast or a document unless you see it in writing and live it. It's not going to touch you the way that it's touching my life for my 12-year-old son.
That's an awesome story. Matter of fact, we had a guest on our show a couple of weeks ago, very much the same thing. Was a mother and has some kids, and now their kids are getting close to 18, 19, 20, and she's teaching them to jump into the business and do the very same thing. And I think it's great. It's almost like you get it in your blood. You can't get rid of it. And then you share it with your kids and they can't get rid of it. I know when I jumped in this business 25 years ago, as many times, even through 08, I'd like to say, let me get out of this business. This is crazy, but I hung in there. And you were explaining about when you were a mortgage banker. Don't you wish we had the option arm right now? Oh my God. And everybody in Congress is saying, no, that's an evil product. No, it was a wonderful product for investors, but well, let's talk about some of your properties. Mercedes, if you have those, you can share them on the screens. Mercedes, and just while she's doing that, her company basically is in multiple markets and she can share those markets, but she's the promoter of these properties in various markets. And her website is off the hook. And so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and share that.
Awesome. Here. All right. I brought it up. You get to see all my stuff. You can tell I was actually working before I hopped on this interview. Awesome. Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Fantastic. Okay, so this is a wonderful cash flow savvy site. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, I created this site probably about 12 years ago, and I have to say it's been really effective. So when you come in, it's probably going to be a little bit different looking because literally we're in the change of or the process of revamping it. Still the same content. It's going to be faced a little bit different. So here's what it's all about. And one of the things I just kind of want to tell you about cash flow savvy generally is I'm all about simplification. Like complexity just gets in your way of success. So I decided to simplify everything. And so if you decided that you wanted to jump on board and literally buy a property to hold it, which sometimes isn't sexy, but I promise you it's effective. I wanted to simplify it. So I created 4 simple steps. And the first step is getting you pre-qualified with, of course, Graham. I decided to do this because from the mortgage banking perspective, if you do that part at the very beginning, it gets everything out of the way. So when I'm focused on you and getting you a property to cash flow, all of the, mortgage stuff and everything that Graham had to get you to pre-qualify is already done. He already did that. So we do that first. And not only that, Graham does an amazing job at telling us what your buying power is. So I'm going to know exactly what you qualify for so that you never over leverage yourself. So that's step 1. Step 2 is you get into my queue so that you can see my exclusive properties. I'll dive into the exclusivity in a moment because there's a difference between seeing my exclusive properties and then seeing what I blast to the world. And then step 3 is once you get in there, you select from what the properties that you see. And then step 4 is the closing process. We do a really, really good job at aligning you with a personal transaction coordinator that works with Graham as well, that all work together so that we can get you to our closing. Generally, we close within 30 to 35 days, and that's because you have all hands on deck here for you. So that's the simple process. Wanted to touch that. Here is my top 10 markets. These will have all of the markets that I did my due diligence on. So these are the markets in Middle America that give you the hot markets where the purchase price, the rent ratio give you a solid return where you can bank on creating wealth. Now, I will say I'm in very stable markets. My markets don't experience huge highs. They don't experience terrible lows. They're very, very stable because they're renter saturated. And I do that on purpose. So there's that. Here's just our testimonials, but more importantly, what I want you to focus on is our properties. Now, here you're going to see a lot of sold properties, but there's always a featured deal of the week. Believe it or not, this changes almost every day because that's how fast properties sell. But to get more information, these are the basics of the property. But when you dive into the more information, it gives you the basic breakdown of the property. And so more importantly, the analysis. Here's your executive summary. Here's your cash flow. Here's your operating expenses. Basically, what you really want is to know what the numbers are. And I've broken down the numbers for you. Now, this is in relation to what's going on. I work really closely with our lenders to kind of see what the going rate is. Of course, it's based on your FICO score, your DTI. But here is where you get your cash on cash investment. And here's an actual projection of what happens if you just hold the property for the next 30 years. Now, I am super, and I do mean super conservative with my analysis because I'd rather under promise and over deliver. So I'm very, very conservative on my figures. You'll see all these figures here. You'll notice that the appreciation here is only 8%. Well, across the nation, appreciation is 12% as we speak. So I'm very conservative on purpose. And then I give these numbers to you from the get-go so that if you have your own matrix outside of ours, I want you to dive into it. Now, notice how I focus on the numbers. I'm not super duper focused on what the property looks like, how pretty it is, because at the end of the day, guys, it really doesn't matter. If the numbers work, here's where it is. Now, my website is full of all kinds of properties. And so you just go back to the properties tab. What I encourage, and then you'll see all these properties. When they're available, it says available. I will say, when you click on more information, to get to speak to me, you just click here and you will get directly in contact with me. Now you'll get a confirmation call from my assistant, Michelle or Suzanne, but I really do hop on the phone with you because I don't have a one size fits all. I work closely with you, Graham, the lender, to get you what's going to be a best fit for you. So don't want to bore you with all of the other properties because you can simply go on my website to see what's available. But the gist of it is all the information that you need is right here every single time you go to my website.
Mercedes, I get a question all the time, and I have to ask you, the professional, because I just don't know. I mean, I have properties in several different markets. I've got 4 in Memphis. I've got some in Indy, got 4 in Indy, but they've always asked me, where are you experiencing the highest appreciations? Well, in the last 3-4 years, almost every market's been in the double digits. I mean, even in like Dallas, Texas, before, say, 5 years ago, we would be lucky to get 5 to 6% on a good day going down the hill with the wind behind us. And then all of a sudden we start going into double digits. And I asked somebody just the other day, we're still in the double digits in Dallas, but like Indy and St. Louis and Memphis, what would you say? And you said 12% across the board. Is that still there for those markets?
It's generally between a 9 and a 12%. Here's what I say, though, regarding appreciation. I don't bank on appreciation. I bank on the increase of rents.
Exactly.
So I don't care what the property does. I know that rents across the market are increasing by 20%. If you looked at my pro forma, I didn't include that figure. So I know that my figures are very conservative. Here's the reality of it, Graham, is I've been doing this for 14 years, and it's almost impossible to find a market that appreciates and that cash flows at the same time. You either get appreciation or you get cash flow, but seldom do you get both. And so the reality is, if you're banking on something that's going to create your wealth, you want to bank on something that creates the wealth in a stable environment. So whether there's a COVID or not, whether there's a pandemic or not, whether there's a crash or not, people are still going to need a roof over their head. So why would you want to be in an appreciating market when you know that if it goes up, damn hell, it's going to come down? So I'm not in markets that appreciate. I say that all day long. I'm in markets that are stable, and I do that for a reason, because what I need to create wealth is stability of rents. And I need the stability of rents that increases with time and inflation. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's why I choose these markets. I prefer stable markets rather than appreciating markets.
Yeah, people ask me all the time, they say, oh, I want to do a 15-year note. I said, why? That cuts into your cash flow. Do a 30-year. If you want to pay it off early, pay it off early. But why? And people ask me all the time, why don't you pay your loans off? Why? I know what my cash flow is today. I know it's going to be like tomorrow because I have a fixed rate loan. The rents are going to go up. Yeah, taxes are going to go up and insurance is going up, but it's all relative because everything's going up. Your cash flow is going up. And especially in today's market, obviously with a little bit higher interest rate, we're only marrying the property, we're dating the rate. Because when we hit that recession wall, which is going to happen probably third, let's say fourth quarter, first quarter, the rates will come back down. And if and when they do, if we fund the loan this year, we're going to refinance you whatever rate that comes available in the next 3 years, and we won't charge you any closing costs. So then you can increase your cash flow at that point. Okay. So
Wait. Say that again. Say that again.
News alert.
Yeah, I didn't get that quite. Wait, say that again.
Okay. If we fund a loan today for a client,
Okay.
in the next 3 years, when the rates come down, which they will, come back to us and we'll refinance them at whatever that rate is, but we won't charge them any closing costs.
Holy cow. That
Yeah.
is amazing, dude. That's awesome.
And we also we just implemented just yesterday a float down program. If you lock down on a rate today, and between your lock date and close date, if the market improves 0.25%, we'll let you float down to the new rate. We won't charge you a thing.
Oh my God, that's genius. That's almost as good as my guaranteed rent program. I guarantee that I'm going to rent the property, or I'm going to sell the property with renters in it. If not, I will pay the rent until we get a tenant for you.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So, oh my goodness, Graham, that's amazing. I mean, you need to be shouting that from like the mountaintops, because that's
we did send out an email. We are doing some follow-up on that, but we are letting everybody know that's what's going on because it's a fabulous program. I'm going to take advantage of a float down now. If not, well, in a year from now, I get to refinance. I'm going to get a better rate anyway. So it's a win-win.
Exactly. And just another reason not to, sit on your hands for a couple of years waiting for rates to magically turn around and lose that time while you could be building that portfolio. Exactly right.
totally.
Mercedes, do you have any properties in Memphis right now?
I do not have properties in Memphis.
Okay. We would love to see another property. I know our listeners are. I mean, this is great. Guys, this website is so intuitive. It is so cool. I mean, it gives you everything you want. Performa, I mean, it gives you, for the people that don't understand how to buy properties, this is the easiest way to look at it.
Awesome. Let's go into this property. I literally just closed this property last week, but this property is a property that's in Kansas City. This Kansas City property. So if you know a little bit about Kansas City,
absolutely.
They won the Super Bowl, sadly, but some people would say, here's one of the things I focus on, guys. And I talk about how I don't harp on how pretty our properties look, but our properties are pretty. Now you'll notice on here that I do everything very, very cookie cutter. And I do everything cookie cutter, but pretty. Look at how pretty our properties are, because I go to Home Depot and get the bulk rates. So everything that Cash Flow Savvy does looks very, very similar. Having said that, it's very attractive to the eye of the renter. Now, notice how I do carpets. Oftentimes I will do floors just to help you conserve your value. Long of the short of it is always go to your executive summary. Here is where you're going to get your numbers. Now, one of the criteria that I personally established when I created this algorithm years ago, that, by the way, I've been perfecting it throughout the years. Notice how every single property will have 3 bedrooms at least, 1 to 2 bathrooms, and everything will be around the 1,000 square feet. Why, you ask? Because that is what the standard renter wants. They want 3 bedrooms and at least 1,000 square feet. So everything, when I talk about my buying box, mostly everything that you'll see through Cash Flow Savvy will be at least 1,000 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 1 to 2 baths, and they have to meet my criteria. So buying box means that our price point is between $100,000 to about $180,000 per property. Now, I purposely do that because that means that rents can be affordable enough so that the average American can afford to buy that property. And then, having said that, You come in with a, here's your income that you're getting. We collect $14,000 in rent. Here is all your net operating expenses. Again, I'm super, super conservative. So at the end of the year, this is what you're cash flowing after taxes. But what that translates to is your 7.7% cash on cash return. Now, again, very conservative figures here. You'll notice I use pretty much the same figures all across the board. Again, at the end of the day, it's all about your numbers. So here is your mortgage information. This was locked in at a 5.5%. Rates are a little bit higher than that. So at this point, this will be a little bit higher. However, you're at a 7% cash on cash return. I always tell my clients, if you have that money parked in your Wells Fargo or Bank of America account, are you getting 7% every single month from parking your money there? If the answer is no, then a cash flowing property is probably a better play for you. So hopefully that one.
I just recently did my taxes, and I was more concerned of what's my refund? What's my refund? And then my accountant, we were on a Zoom call like this, and he looked over and he says, but look at how much money you made last year in real estate. I went, okay, I'm cool. That's good. I like it now. And I didn't worry about the refund. I said, man, I made that much money in real estate last year. That's awesome. So it's the way to go. It's the way I'm going. So let's look at another one. Yeah, these are great.
Let's look at a third property. I'm going to change it up a little bit. Let's go to our St. Louis market. This also sold just a little bit ago. Mostly everything that we sell sells fresh. Now, I'm going to explain that this is the deal of the week. The deal of the week is a little bit different because remember I said my buying box is 3 bedrooms, 1 to 2 bath between a price point of $100,000 to $180,000. This one didn't quite meet that criteria. So it's an $86,000 price point, 2 bedroom, 1 bath, still a little bit smaller than what I like. It rents for $900 a month. However, this was a deal of the week because it didn't meet my criteria, but it's still an excellent deal. So this deal, it's blasted to my VIP investors first. So the people that have been pre-qualified in open escrow. If it does not sell, then it gets blasted out to my mailing list of 80,000 people, and it's a first come, first served basis. That property usually sells within the first 30 minutes, but this is the idea. So this property here, as you can tell, I took a picture once the tenant had already moved in, but back in here, we just provide you pictures with the property. Back to, let's look at our cash flow this time. So this time, I just break down the analysis. Now, this is an analysis broken down. This is an 11% cash on cash return. Now, the reason we did it this way this time is because I am huge on buying a property in cash first to get a deep discount, and then instantly going to Graham and refinancing that property. Now, this shows the refinance figure afterwards. But the idea gives you, when Graham was talking about the benefit of what it gives you, here's a perfect analysis of what your property is doing if you hold it for 15 years. Just holding it. Now think about what you're doing. You're holding a property and somebody else is paying the mortgage that Graham got for you. That's huge.
You know, and everybody, and you probably talk a lot about the exit strategies on these properties. A lot of times people focus around a 5 to 7 year type scenario. I know that I had a lot of properties in Texas and I had them for 5 to 7 years. And then we started seeing all this appreciation. Went, wow, it's time to start selling and do some exchanges and graduate. You sell one, you buy two, and that's the name of the game. You sell one and buy 2 or 3, depending on the appreciation.
Yeah.
So that's also
my mentor said to me one time, always be in escrow. So true.
Nice.
Always be in escrow some way or another, whether it's a refinance to pull money out, whether it's you're buying another property or you're seeing what you can do with the property that you already have. The reality is it's much easier to buy real estate when you have a lender that understands what you're up to, because it's very, very personalized.
Well, thank you. Mercedes, this has been awesome. I wish we could sit here for hours and look at your inventory, but obviously we want to keep the attention of the listeners. So what's the best number that they can get a hold of you, Mercedes, if they need you?
The best thing to do is to contact me through our website. Go to cashflowsavvy.com, and that's savvy with 2 V's. click on the link with that says, you know, speak to a consultant. The consultant is me. You'll hear from my assistants, but you will be able to get on my calendar. I'm super, super open to our listeners just because I believe in making a difference in people's financial future.
Perfect. And all of Mercedes information will be outlined in the description below. Also, if you're on this YouTube, please make sure that you share, because we want to make sure all of the other listeners out there can take advantage of Mercedes and her properties. Not only share, but like and subscribe. And if you have any questions at all, you always can get a hold of us as well. Mercedes, thank you so much today for coming with all these wonderful properties, and we'll look forward to the next ones.
Fantastic. I'm here for you anytime, Graham. Always a
Thank you.
pleasure, buddy.
Take care.